Welcome on Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by CJ Vogel. CJ and I are going to talk a little Texas Longhorn recruiting, but we're going to do something a little different today. I want to slow it down. There's been so much news, CJ, that there hasn't been enough time for analysis, in my opinion. And what I want to do this afternoon, really, when we talk about the Longhorns, is just take down just the offensive side of the ball and the offensive recruiting class, and talk about those guys. Right now, there are 10 offensive players committed to Texas. We expect that number to be the same when they sign on signing day. Now, you can add Matthew Golden, the portal commitment from the University of Houston, but really that's a separate situation. I'm just talking about high school guys, and that's what I want to go over with today and get your take. This episode brought to you, by the way, by Laura Baker, our friend that does Keller Williams Realty. Really one of the special people in the industry. Give her a call, 512-784-0505. That's 512-784-0505. Or email her at laura@andyallenteam.com. Her and her husband are going to be at the tailgate party, CJ, by the way, that we'll be at on January 1st in New Orleans. So big-time Longhorn fan and a great person to boot. All right, let's start and just take the offense, okay? And let's start and go position by position. Trey Owens, young man out of Cy-Fair High School, just won the Houston Touchdown Club Offensive Player of the Year award, passed for 3,333 yards, 43 touchdowns, just 4 interceptions, had a whale of a senior year, but he's not exactly rated that high. He's 6'5", 225, 230 pounds, but he's not a high 4-star prospect like Arch Manning, like Quinn Ewers, who are 5 stars, or KJ Lacey. He's more in that, he's just not that highly rated. I don't know why necessarily. What do you think the Longhorns are getting in Trey Owens, and maybe why is he ranked lower than what some other guys might be?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a unique thing, and this is one of those instances where I'm glad I'm not the one providing these rankings or sitting down responsible for where guys are ranked or whatever. But with Trey, the number one thing that really stands out to me when I watch him play in person, when I watch him communicate with his teammates, is he gets it. He understands what it is to be the leader of his offense, what it is to be a leader of his team. And at the quarterback position, that's what you want. We talked about it with Quinn Ewers this offseason a whole lot. That step that he made in terms of becoming a leader was one of the biggest storylines that Texas had the entire offseason. And I think whenever you come into a program like this, already having that under your belt, it helps you a whole lot in terms of your buy-in to the program and obviously your development down the road. With Trey, again, you have a big arm. You have a guy who's, again, not the best, or the fleetest of foot, but a guy that is agile and mobile enough to extend plays, to maneuver through the pocket and, really find guys down the field, which is really impressive to me when you watch him. And I do think that deep ball is a strength of his. Bobby, I'm sure you've seen the film, but a 10-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio tells you exactly what you need to know.
Yeah, no, there's a couple things I like about him too, and we'll go back and forth and talk a little bit about each player because we have enough time here. My take on it is that Trey can make every throw. He's got the arm. What I saw him do as a senior is something that he talked to us about on Texas Football. And you talked a little bit about it, maneuverability in the pocket. It's not so much that he's fleet of foot. He's not even Arch Manning in that regard, right? Where Arch, you can tell, is pretty quick. He's not Quinn Ewers in that regard. But he may have as good a feel in the pocket, if not better, than Quinn Ewers did at the same time frame, because Ewers dealt out of this in high school. He was, lighting it up the entire time. Owens has had to play under a little bit more duress on a typical night, right? And so I think you combine those two together. The thought that we've had him on this on the show, and I can tell you that he thinks about football in a cerebral manner, if that makes sense. He's processing. He's not just going out there and being a robot. Look, I think he's a classic Steve Sarkisian. Let's get him in the program and try to develop him and see where he's at in a year and a half, 2 years. He's probably going to be ready to play in about a year and a half. Then let's see what happens after that, because I think that he's a quality young guy, but also can make every throw. And that seems to be, to me, like the prerequisite. It doesn't matter whether you're a 3-star or a 5-star to start. you got to be able to make every throw. You agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And one more thing about, when he will be ready to play, with Trey and the University of Texas, he has a deep love for this school. When Texas opted for him to be the quarterback in this class, he wasted very little time to jump in the boat and say, this is where I want to end up. This is where I want to be. And I think that's very important, for quarterbacks, especially if you don't see the field right away, what happens. We're seeing it now with the portal and how crazy it's been in the quarterback market. So I don't necessarily see, if 2 years, go by and he hasn't necessarily seen the field the way he's want to see, I don't really this early consider him a big portal threat. And that's very key to be an experienced veteran quarterback to eventually step in.
Well, no, I mean, look, in all Steve Sarkisian has to do is say, hey, look, Mac Jones over here waited behind a first-round pick. Right? Not just one, but two. That's the way that may be the case. And less wear and tear on your body, end up being a first-round pick. You never know, but I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying, as it relates to quarterbacks.
Absolutely.
No, but as it relates to quarterbacks, who better than Steve Sarkisian to go tutor? No, all right, let's move to running backs. Texas takes two in this class. Christian Clark out of the Phoenix area, and then Jerrick Gibson out of Bradenton, Florida, by way of Ocala, Florida. Both out-of-state guys. Hey, CJ, there are 4 or 5 running backs in the state of Texas that Texas passed on to take both Gibson and Clark. Start with Clark and tell me what you think of him, and then we'll talk about Gibson next.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of Christian Clark. I think, going back to the ratings, this is a guy I'm looking at where I'm thinking, that ratings should be a little bit more favorable here. And obviously for Texas fans, the last running back out of Arizona that came to Austin worked out pretty well. I do see some similarities in this game for Christian Clark. This is a guy, very rarely do you see him going down off of first contact. I love what I see in terms of the one cut and go, but also, he can dance around. He has the patience, and he has shown the patience to really pick and choose when he wants to burst through the hole. And that's something that at the high school level, you see very rarely. Texas and Tashard Choice really made the right choice, no pun intended, to go out west and get Christian Clark in the fold. He's probably my favorite back Texas has recruited this year. He's that number one guy on my board, my personal board. Do you see it the same way? Is that
I like him a lot. You know what he does great, and you mentioned Tashard Choice, and we can call him a witch if you want to when it comes to the recruiting trail, because he's literally gotten who he's wanted the last couple of years. I would say this: Christian Clark's feet in the hole are ridiculous.
Yes.
The guy he reminds me of, and this is going to be kind of scary, is Joe Mixon.
Okay.
Play perspective.
He was pretty good, huh?
Yeah, that's a Pro Bowl level running back. Of course, he did some things off the field to play the Oklahoma running back that people don't like, but on the field, those kind of feet in the hole are things that I could see him doing. He's kind of subtle with it, you know what I mean? And so I feel like he's tremendous. Gibson's a little bit different. I saw him play in person against Lipscomb Academy earlier this year. Gibson is a true pounder. Like he likes contact. He seeks contact. Now he can run through people. He's just a little bit different. I think Clark is physical too. Clark played linebacker in high school and was injured a little bit coming into his senior year. But I think Texas and Tashard Choice, I think they have a type at running back. You're either going to be able to break tackles or make people miss, or you're going to be a jet. Now, I don't think either of these two guys are the jet caliber. Right. They're more the pound it, let's break some tackles, let's run through people, that sort of thing, which there's an element here, may fit what you want to do in the SEC, especially because you have Trey Wisner already on campus from last year's class that kind of fits that jet role. Jaden Blue fits a little bit of that too. I feel like these guys, it's interesting. We talk about Texas being very specific, and they're doing a great job from the director of player personnel and roster management perspective. I feel those two combined, CJ, make a lot of sense within the structure of the entire roster. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely what you talk about roster construction. At the running back position specifically, I mean, you hear about it all the time when guys have that thunder and lightning combination in terms of we got the big back that'll power you, that'll wear you down, that'll, when the game gets going, that's the last guy on earth that you want to be trying to tackle in the fourth quarter. Whereas, you also have the change of pace guy. I'm looking at Gibson's stats over here, 1,400 yards on the ground this year. Again, playing at IMG, you're going to be playing against some top competition around the country simply because that's how they schedule their games. And so being able to do that, showing that at the high school level has been very impressive. I'm a big fan of Gibson. I'm sure, you talked about the bruising style of play that he comes with. That photo of him and Tashard Choice on the in-home, man, I mean, he got some biceps on him. I mean, that's one of the most impressively physical specimens in this class, I would say, in the T-shirt and shorts perspective. But I'm excited to see the combination of the both of them. And, we've only seen great running backs since Sarkisian has been here, whether it be Bijan and Roshan, obviously Jonathan Brooks this year. And we're seeing it again from CJ Baxter and Jaden Blue. So it just continues.
Tashard Choice, like I said, I think he's just a special recruiter and a special developer. He had 2 first-round picks last year. I mean, not just Bijan Robinson, but Jahmyr Gibbs too.
Yeah.
So just got to keep that in mind. All right, at wide receiver, okay, 3 future Longhorns, Ryan Wingo, Parker Livingstone, and Freddie Dubose. Wingo and Livingstone are both mid-year enrollees. All 3 of these guys, though, this is a concern potentially. All 3 of them dealt with nagging injuries. Wingo was more of a nagging injury. Livingstone had to sit out most of his senior year. Dubose had a big knee injury, sat out almost all of his junior year, and then came back this year. Let's talk about Ryan Wingo to start, because he's the highest rated of the 3. He's the 5-star out of St. Louis that has what we think is just big playability on the outside. Give us your thoughts on Ryan Wingo, CJ.
No, big playability is putting it perfectly there, and it comes with a big frame and the ability to stretch the field. And I think with Sarkisian's offense, that perfect fit where A.D. Mitchell stepped in this year is exactly what we'll see down the road from Ryan Wingo. I think they play very similarly. There will need to be some development and, tightening up of the route tree. And I think that's, safe to say for all high school receivers coming in. That's a tough thing. It's a nuanced, approach to the receiver position, which only gets better over time. With Wingo, what impresses me the most is the ability to go up and get it. And I think with a big body receiver, that's exactly what you want to see. A guy that uses his hands to his advantage, can go up, high point the football, and still come down and take it to the crib if need be. There's a reason why there's five stars next to his name. He's a very talented prospect, albeit still pretty raw in my book. I think it's a little unfair to say he's going to be, that guy, right away in this offense the minute he steps in. But, that sophomore year, I'm expecting a pretty big jump, and I think that should be the case for, most of these 5-star guys in the class.
Yeah, it's getting to the point where, look, Texas is getting good players across the board. That's just the reality of it. And so now we're going to sit back and see who really performs and amps it up once they get on campus. Parker Livingstone, another guy that I think is a cerebral player, but he's more than just cerebral. I mean, he's one of the top 400-meter guys. He would be if he really focused on that in the state. I think he's got terrific go up and get him 50-50 ball ability as well. Yeah. Has some natural ball skills to him. He's played other sports, I think, and that plays into it. Another, just like Wingo and just like Dubose, all of these are big receivers, by the way. Right. You agree with that? You think they're big, right? That it's clear. I mean, what's Livingstone, 6'4", 6'3" and a half?
No, a true 6'4" at that. It's.
Wait, I got to say this before you say anything about Livingstone. I got to tell people CJ Vogel went to Lovelady High School, so I need to tell people that Lovejoy High School. There we go. So I have to tell you that CJ may have a little soft spot for Parker Livingstone. Go ahead, CJ.
No, and I hate that I'm following this up with this comment, but Parker, to me, is probably the most underrated prospect in the state of Texas. I've watched him for 4 years now at Lovejoy, and he came over from J.J. Pierce early in his high school career. I was aware of him the minute he came in, saw him in summer. This is a guy, and Lovejoy's had some good receivers. Obviously, Kyle Parker at LSU, Jackson Lavender at SMU currently. These are guys that produce all over the field. When I saw Parker Livingstone week 1 in the Tom Landry Classic at Allen High School, it was one of the most impressive single game performances from a high school wide receiver that I've ever seen. I think there were 4 total touchdowns. He threw a touchdown. He had a kickoff return touchdown at 6'4". I feel like, for a receiver that big to be able to return kicks and punts, that's not necessarily that typical mold you see in returners like that. So it is impressive to me. And like you said, the number one thing that people overlook about when it comes to Parker Livingstone is his speed, and that track times, the 200 and 400 meters that he's running, I think he even got some hurdles in there as well. Speeds translate. He's got great hands. And when you put it all together, you got a special prospect.
Right, I'm going to keep you to that. Mark it down, folks. CJ Vogel said Parker Livingstone, the most underrated player in the state of Texas. Not just
I've been pounding the drum.
No, that's okay. This is good. We'll keep track. All right, Freddie Dubose out of Smithson Valley by way of Schertz Clemens. He started his career there, had the knee injury. I watched him a little bit in the state championship games on Saturday. He doesn't look like he's really fluid back to his pre-injury. Is that a concern? Is that something that other people have noticed? What's going on there with Freddie?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more of a process with getting him back, kind of to where he was prior to that ACL injury. And we've seen ACL injuries, they take time. And at the receiver position, I don't want to necessarily say it's a red flag, but it is concerning. And we've seen it, and we saw it all this year with Isaiah Nayor. How quickly are you able to come back 100%? And, what did stand out to me and what was a positive side, this was a guy 6 months after he tore his ACL. He's running full speed, full routes at the Under Armour All-American camp up in Dallas after his injury. 6 months, he was back into the fold. And kind of looking back, I'm wondering, was that the right move? Because, as we said, it's tough. But again, the fluidity is something that you can work on. You can work on coming out of breaks. If your knee is 100% there, we should be able to see that true track time that we talked about with Freddie Dubose a lot. But it's all about getting back to where you want to be with Dubose. And I mean, aside from that, Bobby, I wanted to get your take on Freddie, because he's a guy that was fed the ball a lot in his high school career.
Yeah, my take on it was really interesting. I thought that if he weren't injured, I thought he had maybe the most impressive video of any of the in-state receivers. Once he's been injured now, his video's not in that category. I mean, he's still favoring it clearly. It doesn't mean, to my point though, that could be a year and a half recovery, right? And so I feel like he went back and he's just that kind of competitor, right? He didn't want to stay off the field because that's not what he wanted for himself. I think Texas will take a more judicious look at it, an outlook, and try to bring him along the right way. Okay, I want to say thank you again to our sponsor of the show, Keller Williams Realtor, Laura Baker, good friend and a great realtor, actually. If you get a chance and you're moving to, from, or within the Austin area, there's nobody you want to call except Laura, 512-784-0505, or reach out to her via email, laura@andyallenteam.com. Thank you, Laura, for your sponsorship of the Monday Roundup. All right, hey, I want to ask you this, CJ. Going to the next group, there's really only 4 guys left on the offensive side of the ball. Jordan Washington, let's start with him. He is a guy that kind of burst onto the scene and got a bunch of offers in the spring. Not many people even knew who he was, but Texas offered, A&M offered, Alabama offered. All of a sudden, the 6'4", 225-pound, 20-pound tight end was getting offers from all over the country. Jeff Banks, the Texas tight ends coach, included. Basketball player as well. Your thoughts on him and how he played this year and how he fits in this offense, in your opinion?
Bobby, do you, having watched football forever, have you ever seen, tight ends with basketball backgrounds have success, anywhere? To name a few. There's been some.
Look, Tony Gonzalez. One of my very first players that I ever ranked a 5-star, was actually a 6.1 back before there was an internet, was Tony Gonzalez, who played basketball who played football not only at Cal but also basketball at Cal. I've got a big affinity for basketball players that play tight end that also have physicality. Martellus Bennett, Jermichael Finley, those kind of guys. They have those long arms and they have the strength to actually kind of maneuver in the post, and they're a little wily. You know what I mean? They can get open that way. That's what I love about basketball playing tight ends.
No, and to build on that, it excites the hell out of me. I'm so excited to see that, because all you do as a receiver or as a rebounder in basketball is get up, go get the ball, use your hands, use your body, contort your body to be in a position to go up and get the ball at the highest point. And at that frame, that's exciting to me. When you're in contested traffic, you're used to that. And I do think, the receiving ability of Jordan Washington is very impressive. I think that this is a guy that once you toss him into this system, that route tree and the way that you open the field up currently with Jatavian Sanders, it should still be present after a year or two of really getting into the college weight room, the realm of the world that is college football. So I love Jordan Washington as a prospect. And like you said, when it comes to blocking, as long as you show a willingness to put your hat on a guy that's much bigger than you in the trenches, I'll take that out of high school all day, because it is a learning curve. And it is something that, you can't teach somebody to want to go hit another guy that's 70 pounds heavier than you.
You got to have a desire to play football. Yeah. The sport is not two below. It's not touch, right? All right. No. Now, you mentioned Parker Livingstone as your underrated player. My two really are Christian Clark and Jordan Washington. Those are my two
good ones.
I understand Livingstone too, as well as a pick. All right, let's move on to offensive line. Brandon Baker out of Santa Ana Mater Dei is the tackle prospect of this group. I think we can both agree with that. The guard prospect is Nate Kibble out of Atascocita. Like Trey Owens, he was nominated for the Offensive Player of the Year in the Houston area as an offensive lineman. So that's saying something. And then Daniel Cruz out of Richland, up in the Fort Worth Metroplex area, in the mid-cities, I guess you would call it, out of Richland. Those three are an interesting group because they each fill specific roles for Texas. Let's start with Brandon Baker and what you think of him, the young man out of Mater Dei that is ranked a 5-star.
No, yeah. If you ever want to talk about a rotating door of filling a need with supreme talent, look no further than what Brandon Baker will be stepping into potentially once Kelvin Bates departs next year. That's – if you're ever going to lose a 5-star tackle and have another 5-star tackle stepping in, that's the position you want to have it at. And so I love Brandon Baker. And the thing that stands out to me is his feet. And I think that's really encouraging, when you're now dealing with the elite pass rushers in the country in the SEC every weekend. The saying, slow feet don't eat. And so you can teach technique. You can teach, pass rushing, defenses, if you will, for that tackle position. What you can't teach is having quick feet. And I think that, coming into the college level with that already under your belt certainly helps. And I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I am too. I agree. And I think he's going to start at right tackle. That's what he's been told he's going to start at. Okay. And then they may move him to the left tackle as needed. Trevor Goosby's over there already. Jaden Chapman's gotten some chances there. Suffice to say, Texas has some good linemen in the pipeline. They also have Nate Kibble coming. That's the guard out of Atascocita. Atascocita has produced, Sam Cosme, Kenyon Green, first-round pick.
Cam Dewberry.
And now Nate Kibble committed to Texas. Tell us a little bit about Nate.
No, Nate's a fun one. He was a guy who really kind of burst on the scene, I want to say his sophomore year, as a result of playing on the same offensive line as Cam Dewberry. That was a game I would go down to see Dewberry in practice and come away thinking, that kid at, guard next to him was pretty darn good as well. So no, I'm a big fan of his. I think what you see right here is a guy who on the interior, you want to see him climb to second levels. You want to see him in the running game specifically get vertically down the field to create running lanes, to open things up. And that's exactly what it does. He's a road grader. I was very encouraged. I watched him against North Shore, who, had a defensive line with Chris Ross and a number of guys that went Division I, in that front seven. Tascocita hung with them, through the jump. So, and it starts with that offensive line, and he's a big component of what we like to see so far with Hayden Connor and DJ Campbell and Cole Hudson's development is just continuing the climb. And Kyle Flood, big body, that's a 300-plus pounder.
The other thing about Nate Kibble, he has a good wingspan too.
Yeah.
That's another thing that they like about him at guard, because as you go to the SEC, not only do you have to have the weight, but the quickness of the defensive lineman in pass protection requires you to have bigger wingspan probably. All right, the guy that I think is the road grader in this class is Daniel Cruz. Having talked to a lot of people, including Jerry Hamilton, about this back when we were talking, the thing about Daniel Cruz that's outstanding is he literally was Kyle Flood's number one choice at center from the get-go. Texas passed on a guy out in East Texas that likely would have gone to Texas, but they rated as a center, and he's now going to Alabama. He's
right.
He's not a bad player by any stretch, but
not
Texas
at all.
Third, Daniel Cruz, a guy that frankly has a whole lot of nasty to him, I think.
Yeah, I think on top of that, you talked about cerebral players when it comes to Parker Livingstone and Trey Owens previously. Daniel Cruz is a kid that gets it. I mean, when you talk ball to him, and anytime I would see him after a visit, on campus, after his visit as he exits, the facility or he's departing home, the number one thing he talks about is sitting down with Kyle Flood and being able to go over film, whether it be his or what they do at Texas. That's his number one takeaway and has been since he's been on campus a few times this year. With Cruz, also the number one thing that I want to point out, this is a guy who voluntarily moved to center this year to prepare himself for the move or to the jump to college this year or next year. So that's something that, again, I talk about a guy who gets it, being able to say, hey, coach, let me play the position I'm going to eventually be at permanently. It says it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw him pull the center in high school. You don't see that much unless you have a really special center prospect.
Right.
All right, overall, like I said, 10 guys total in this recruiting class, not including Matthew Golden, the portal transfer. We'll talk about him, or we've talked about him separately. How do you feel like Texas addressed needs? Any strengths in this? Any glaring weaknesses to you? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Receiver is one that I think is a good strength. And I do think it is, you mentioned the injuries and kind of the nagging time away from the field for all three, really. But when you look at the three and how their ceilings stack up comparatively to, classes in the past, adding, three big body guys that can stretch the field vertically will always pan out well in the Steve Sarkisian offense. And that really is impressive to me. And then at the tackle position, anytime you can add a guy with a 5-star pedigree and really set of tools that comes with Brandon Baker, you can never complain about that.
Yeah, I like them all. I like Jordan Washington as a kind of that under the radar guy. I love Christian Clark's game. I like Trey Owens as a developmental quarterback because I think he's got all the tools. I mean, you put him in the oven and let him bake and see what he ends up in a year. I'm serious. I think that is like a perfect person because I think that he's going to end up really making himself bigger, more physical, over time. And then the offensive line, I think they got 3 future guys that can start for him. So you mix all that together with the guys like Wingo and Livingstone that can score touchdowns, Jerrick Gibson. I think it's a good overall class. And, as we look at this, we're looking at, can this group compete in the SEC, right? And I think they can because I think they got some touchdown makers. I think Wingo and Livingstone in particular, Clark, another one that I think can make people miss. Owens protects the ball. Washington, I think, can score touchdowns. End of the day, I mean, Steve Sarkisian doing Steve Sarkisian things and a really good offensive class, in my opinion.
No, absolutely. I'm right there with you. And, we've talked in the past about Sarkisian and his crew being able to go out and handpick guys. There's no one more that he's been able to handpick than, like you mentioned, Daniel Cruz, Trey Owens, Parker Livingstone, guys who the minute they said, we want you to be a part of our class, they jumped in the boat. Says a lot about where this program is headed and why they want to be a part of this offense.
Yeah, I love it. All right, that's going to do it for today. Wanted to do something and slow it down a little bit. Talk to CJ about all of these players and get going on it. So for CJ Vogel, I'm Bobby Burton. Thanks to Laura Baker of Keller Williams Realty. This has been On Texas Football.